Tonight on Dreadful Visions, we explore the vulnerable space of moving into a new home. There is a specific kind of stress that comes with unpacking your life in an unfamiliar place. You are surrounded by taped cardboard boxes, late-night silence, and rooms that do not quite feel like yours yet. We naturally expect our house to be a safe place, somewhere closing the front door shuts out the rest of the world. But during those first few days, before you know the neighborhood or who has access to the property, that safety is easily broken. Sometimes, the scariest realization isn't that you are alone, but that someone else is still treating your private space as their own. Story 1. The Smart Home Left Behind. 28-year-old Marcus Vance had spent 3 months preparing for his move to Denver, Colorado. After getting a promotion at work, he rented a 2-bedroom house in a quiet neighborhood just outside the city. The house was modern, clean, and filled with smart home gear left behind by the last tenant, including digital door locks, security cameras, automated lights, and a main control panel on the wall. On his first night, Marcus focused on unpacking the basics. He set up his bed, turned on his computer, and unpacked a few boxes. By 11 o'clock, the neighborhood was completely dark and quiet. Exhausted from a long 10-hour drive, Marcus locked the front door, checked the back door, and went upstairs to sleep. At 2:15 in the morning, Marcus woke up suddenly. The main lights in his bedroom had suddenly turned on at full brightness. He sat up, squinting at the light, thinking he must have messed up a timer setting on the system earlier. Before he could even get out of bed, the lights shut off again, dropping the room back into pitch darkness. A second later, a loud electronic chime rang out from the hallway downstairs. Marcus put on some sweatpants, grabbed a flashlight from his nightstand, and walked out onto the stairs. The main control panel on the wall was glowing softly. As he walked up to it, the screen showed a new alert. Guest access granted, front porch camera. He tapped the screen to open the settings. Looking through the logs, Marcus realized the smart system was never reset when the last renter moved out. It was still connected to a main account named David, the man who lived there before him. Marcus tried to remove the old account, but the screen said only the original owner could change those settings from his phone app. A soft thud came from the ground floor, followed by the quiet sound of the back glass door unlocking itself. Marcus froze at the top of the stairs, pointing his flashlight down the hallway. The electronic lock on the back door clicked, its light changing from red to green. Slowly, the heavy glass door slid open all by itself, letting the freezing cold night air rush into the house. Marcus did not run downstairs to check it out alone. Instead, he backed into his bedroom, locked his door, and called the local police line right away. He told the dispatcher he had just moved in and that someone seemed to be opening his doors remotely using a phone app. The dispatcher told him a police car was on its way and advised him to stay locked in his room until help arrived. While he was waiting on the phone, the lights in his bedroom flashed twice and shut off. A moment later, the small smart speaker on his desk made a quiet static noise. A calm, unfamiliar man's voice came through the speaker, speaking softly, asking Marcus if he was enjoying his new house. The voice came through the small speaker with total clarity, asking Marcus if he was comfortable and if he liked the way the previous owner had set up the property. Marcus did not answer. He kept his back pressed against his bedroom door, holding his flashlight like a weapon, and told the police dispatcher on the phone what was happening in real time. The dispatcher stayed on the line, telling him that a squad car was turning onto his street. Downstairs, the house continued to react to commands from someone miles away. The kitchen lights began to flash on and off in a steady, rhythmic pattern. The automated blinds on the living room windows opened and closed repeatedly, slapping against the glass. It sounded like the house was coming alive, completely controlled by an unseen hand. Marcus listened closely, trying to separate the noise of the automated devices from any actual footsteps inside the house. That was when he heard a low, metallic scraping sound coming from the lower hallway. Someone was definitely inside, moving toward the stairs. The voice from the speaker spoke again, lower this time. It said that David had spent years building the home automation system, and that he had no intention of letting a complete stranger take over his creation. The speaker explained that when the lease ended, David had duplicated the house keys and kept his admin access active so he could monitor the property whenever he wanted. He had been watching Marcus through the porch camera since the moving truck arrived earlier that afternoon. A heavy footstep landed on the bottom stair. Marcus held his breath. The intruder was moving slowly up the wooden staircase, taking one deliberate step at a time. Through the thin gap beneath his bedroom door, Marcus saw the landing lights flick on. A shadow blocked the light as a figure reached the top of the stairs and stopped directly outside his bedroom. The door handle jiggled softly. Someone was testing the lock from the outside. Marcus shouted through the door, warning the man that the police were already on his street. For a few seconds, everything went dead silent. The speaker stopped making noise, the lights downstairs ceased flashing, and the figure outside stood completely motionless on the other side of the thin wooden door. Then, bright red and blue emergency lights flashed through the bedroom window. A police car pulled into the driveway, its tires crunching against the gravel, and a loud siren gave a quick, sharp chirp. The door handle suddenly stopped moving. Heavy, fast footsteps rushed back down the stairs toward the rear of the house. Marcus heard the back glass door slam shut, followed by the sound of someone scaling the tall wooden fence in the backyard. When the officers kicked open the front door and cleared the house, they found the back patio gate wide open and footprints leading into the dark alleyway behind the property. Inside the house, the intruder had left a small duffel bag near the bottom of the stairs. Inside the bag were several hand tools, a ring of copied house keys, and a tablet computer that was still turned on, showing live camera feeds of every room on the ground floor. The police filed a report for felony stalking, breaking and entering, and illegal surveillance. They tracked down the former tenant, David, 2 days later at a hotel across town. It turned out he had been doing the exact same thing to the previous renters for months, secretly watching them through the smart system and entering the house late at night while they slept. Marcus had the landlord immediately rip out the entire smart system and replace every lock in the house with simple, heavy-duty mechanical deadbolts. He also installed his own standalone security system that was entirely offline. Moving into a new place is supposed to be the start of a fresh chapter, but Marcus never quite got comfortable in that house. Even after David was arrested and the smart gear was thrown away, Marcus could never shake the feeling that someone was watching him whenever a light flickered or a floorboard creaked in the middle of the night. Story 2. The Moving Crew. 32-year-old Jason Miller was relocating from Chicago, Illinois, to a quiet suburban neighborhood in Austin, Texas. Since he was moving his entire life across several states, he decided to hire a full-service moving company to load, transport, and unpack his belongings. He picked a well-reviewed national business, and on a Tuesday morning, a large white moving truck backed up into his driveway. 3 men got out to handle the job. 2 of the workers focused on lifting the heavy furniture, while the third man, an older worker named Greg, took charge of labeling the boxes and organizing the inventory list. From the very beginning, Greg was unusually friendly. He asked Jason detailed questions about why he was moving, what kind of job he had waiting for him in Texas, and whether he was living alone. Jason answered politely, assuming Greg was just making small talk to pass the time during a long workday. By 5 o'clock that evening, the truck was fully loaded. Before driving away, Greg asked Jason for his exact new address and his personal cell phone number, explaining that the company needed it to coordinate the drop-off time 2 days later. Jason wrote it down on the contract, signed the paperwork, and watched the truck drive off into the highway traffic. Jason flew to Austin the next morning, staying at a local hotel while he waited for his furniture to arrive. On Thursday afternoon, the moving truck pulled up to his new house right on schedule. However, only 2 workers got out of the cab this time. Greg was not with them. When Jason asked about him, one of the movers mentioned that Greg had called in sick that morning and stayed back at the main depot. The crew spent 4 hours unloading the boxes into the house, finished the job, and left just before sunset. That evening, Jason began unpacking the essentials. By 10 o'clock, the living room was filled with open cardboard boxes and bubble wrap. As he was tape cutting a box marked for his home office, his phone buzzed on the kitchen counter. It was a text message from an unknown number. The message read, "Hope you settled in okay. The neighborhood looks very quiet at night." Jason replied, asking who it was. A few seconds later, another message came back. "It's Greg from the moving crew. Just making sure everything made it into the master bedroom safely." Jason felt a quick wave of discomfort. While Greg had been given his phone number for the delivery contract, using a personal phone to text a client late at night violated basic business rules. Jason sent a short, polite reply saying everything was fine and that he was going to sleep, hoping to end the conversation right there. Instead of stopping, Greg replied immediately with another text. "I noticed you didn't set up your security system yet. You should lock your doors." Jason stood frozen in his empty kitchen. His house sat on a large residential lot with thick trees along the property line, and the front blinds were partially open. He quickly walked over to the window and pulled the blinds shut. He had not mentioned anything about a security system to the moving crew, nor was there any sign outside the house indicating whether an alarm was installed. He walked around the entire house, verifying that every window was latched and locking both the front and back deadbolts. Sitting down on his couch in the quiet living room, he decided he would call the moving company's corporate office first thing in the morning to file a formal complaint against Greg. At 1:15 in the morning, a soft vibration sounded against the hardwood floor. It was another text message from Greg. This time, it contained a photo. It was a clear, high-resolution picture taken from outside in the dark, showing Jason sitting on his living room couch just 20 minutes earlier through a tiny gap in the closed front window blinds. Jason stared at his phone screen, his stomach dropping as he looked at the photo. The picture showed his living room from an angle right outside his front window, captured just moments after he had closed the blinds. Greg was not at a depot in another state. He was standing right outside his house in the dark. Jason turned off his phone flashlight and backed away from the window, retreating into the hallway where he could not be seen from the street. He immediately called 911. Keeping his voice as low as possible, he told the emergency dispatcher that a man who had helped move his furniture earlier that week was currently stalking him outside his new home and sending photos through the window. The dispatcher logged his address and told him officers were on their way, advising him to stay in the hallway and keep away from all doors and windows. While he waited in the dark corridor, his phone vibrated again in his hand. It was a phone call from the same unknown number. Jason did not answer it, letting it go straight to voicemail. A second later, a notification popped up showing a brief automated transcript of the voicemail Greg had just left. In the message, Greg spoke in a calm, flat tone. He said he had taken special care of Jason's boxes back in Chicago, adding that it was easy to gather information on someone when you were the one packing up their entire life. He mentioned that he knew where Jason worked, where his family lived, and that he knew Jason was home alone tonight. He added that he had kept a spare set of house keys that were tucked inside the original lease folder in one of the unpacked boxes. A cold wave of fear washed over Jason as he realized what had happened. During the move in Chicago, Greg had gone through his personal paperwork boxes, found the extra keys handed over by the real estate agent, and kept them for himself before sealing the box back up. Suddenly, a quiet metallic click echoed from the front entryway. Jason watched the front door deadbolt slowly turn from the inside keyhole. Someone was inserting a key into the lock from the porch outside. Jason did not wait to see the door open. He ran down the back hallway, unlocked the back door, and slipped out into the backyard. He scrambled over the side wooden fence into his neighbor's yard and hid behind a cluster of bushes near their driveway, keeping his eyes glued to his house. From his hiding spot, Jason saw a dark figure slowly step out of his front door. The man was wearing a heavy dark jacket and holding a small flashlight. He stood on the front porch for a moment, scanning the quiet street, before walking briskly down the driveway toward an unmarked sedan parked down the block. Before the man could reach his car, a police cruiser turned onto the street with its headlights off, rapidly approaching the house. The officers spotted the man walking in the street and immediately pulled up alongside him, throwing on their overhead emergency lights and spotlight. Officers jumped out of the cruiser and ordered Greg to put his hands up. When they searched him on the spot, they found Jason's spare house keys in his jacket pocket, along with a notebook containing written details about several other clients Greg had moved over the past year. It turned out Greg had been using his job at the moving company to target people relocating to new cities alone. He would scout their belongings during the move, steal spare keys or access codes, and follow them to their new homes days later to break in while they were still setting up. The police arrested Greg on charges of felony stalking, attempted burglary, and trespassing. The moving company was notified immediately, leading to a full internal audit and the firing of the regional manager who had hired Greg without conducting a proper background check. Jason spent the next day changing every lock on his doors, installing heavy-duty deadbolts, and setting up a full perimeter security camera system. Even with Greg behind bars, the experience completely ruined the excitement of moving into a new home. For months afterward, every time a delivery truck slowed down on his street or a text message buzzed on his phone, Jason felt that same terrible knot tighten in his chest. Story 3. The Welcome Neighbor. 29-year-old Sarah Jenkins had just purchased her first property, a charming single-family home in a quiet suburban neighborhood in Columbus, Ohio. After years of living in noisy apartment buildings, she looked forward to having her own yard, a garage, and a peaceful environment. The street was lined with neat lawns and mature oak trees, populated mostly by young families and retirees who kept their properties well maintained. On her second day in the house, while she was carrying a stack of empty cardboard boxes out to the recycling bin on the driveway, a man walked across the grass from the house next door. He introduced himself as Arthur, a retired gentleman in his late 60s who had lived on the block for over 20 years. Arthur was polite, soft-spoken, and exceptionally welcoming. He gave her a small box of bakery cookies, offered to lend her tools if she needed to assemble furniture, and mentioned that he kept a close eye on the street to make sure everyone stayed safe. Sarah thanked him warmly, appreciating the friendly welcome. She explained that she worked as a remote data analyst, which meant she spent most of her time working from her home office on the second floor. Arthur smiled, made a brief comment about how nice it was to have a neighbor who would be around during the day, and strolled back to his house. At first, Arthur's presence seemed completely harmless. He was often out in his front yard tending to his garden, washing his car, or sweeping his driveway. Whenever Sarah walked out to get her mail or take out the trash, Arthur would wave and strike up a conversation. However, by the end of her first week, Sarah began to notice a pattern that felt slightly off. No matter what time of day she stepped outside, Arthur seemed to appear within seconds. If she went out at 7 in the morning to grab the newspaper, Arthur was already at his porch railing, watching her. If she stepped onto her back patio at 9 at night to let her dog out, she would see the dim glow of a cigarette across the fence line in Arthur's yard, his silhouette standing perfectly still in the dark. It soon went beyond simple neighborly chats. During one afternoon conversation over the front fence, Arthur casually mentioned that she seemed to be staying up past 2 in the morning a lot, noting that her office light had been on until 3 a.m. the night before. Another time, he remarked that her sister had visited on Tuesday afternoon, accurately describing the color and model of her sister's car, even though Sarah had never mentioned having family over. Sarah brushed off her growing unease, telling herself that Arthur was simply an elderly man with too much free time and a habit of looking out the window. The situation escalated on a Thursday evening. Sarah came home from the grocery store around 8 o'clock and pulled her car into the garage. As she opened her trunk to grab her bags, Arthur walked right into her open garage without knocking or calling out. He stood right behind her car, startling her so badly she dropped a bag of produce onto the concrete floor. Arthur apologized, but his tone was completely flat. He picked up her fallen groceries and handed them to her, then pointed toward the dashboard of her car. He asked why her commuter pass was from a different district than the company she had told him about on her first day. Sarah felt a cold wave of anxiety wash over her. She realized Arthur had been standing in her garage looking through her car window before she even turned off the engine. She took her bags, firmly told him that she was tired and needed to be left alone, and quickly hit the wall button to close the heavy garage door, forcing Arthur to step back onto the driveway. That night, Sarah pulled all the blinds shut across every window in her house. She sat at her kitchen table, feeling trapped in her own home. She looked out the side window through a narrow slit in the curtains toward Arthur's house. His two-story house sat just 30 feet away. On his second floor, directly opposite her home office window, sat a pair of heavy black binoculars resting on a tripod, angled directly toward her desk. Sarah stared at the tripod positioned in Arthur's second-floor window, her heart racing as the reality of the situation set in. The binoculars were pointed directly at the spot where she sat every day to work, read, and make phone calls. Arthur had not just been making polite conversation or looking out his front window. He had been systematically spying on her private life from the moment she moved in. She backed away from the curtain and immediately called her local police department. She explained to the officer on duty that her neighbor had entered her garage uninvited, questioned her personal routines, and set up optical equipment aimed directly into her home office. The desk sergeant noted her complaint, but explained that because Arthur was on his own property and had not made explicit threats, their options were limited. They promised to send a patrol officer by the following afternoon to conduct a welfare check and speak with him directly. Unsatisfied with waiting, Sarah decided to take immediate steps to protect her privacy. She spent the next morning driving to a local home improvement store, purchasing heavy blackout curtains for every window on the side of her house facing Arthur's property, along with a full perimeter security camera kit. While she was on a ladder in her driveway installing the first outdoor motion camera near her garage, Arthur walked over to the property line. He stood on his side of the grass, watching her with a tense, unreadable expression. In a sharp, demanding tone, he asked why she was putting up cameras, claiming that recording near his yard was a violation of his privacy. Sarah did not back down. She stayed on the ladder, looked him dead in the eye, and told him that she knew about the binoculars in his upstairs window. She made it clear that any further attempt to approach her, enter her garage, or watch her house would result in an immediate call to 911 and a formal application for a restraining order. Arthur did not yell or offer an excuse. He simply stared at her for several long seconds, turned around without a word, and walked back inside his house, slamming his front door behind him. Later that evening around 9 o'clock, Sarah was finishing up the camera installation from inside her house, connecting the wireless system to her smartphone app. As soon as the system went live, a push notification popped up on her phone screen. Motion detected, side yard. She opened the live camera feed. The infrared night vision showed Arthur standing in the narrow, dark alleyway between their two houses. He was holding a pair of heavy wire cutters, reaching up toward her outdoor electrical meter and main junction box in an obvious attempt to cut power to her security system. Sarah immediately dialed 911, explaining to the dispatcher that her neighbor was actively vandalizing her home's electrical line and attempting to cut her power in the dark. Because it was an active crime in progress, 2 police cruisers arrived within 4 minutes, pulling onto the street with their headlights off. The officers caught Arthur red-handed behind her house, still holding the wire cutters near the damaged electrical conduit. When officers searched Arthur's house under a search warrant late that night, they discovered a disturbing setup. Inside his second-floor room, alongside the high-powered binoculars, was a detailed daily journal detailing Sarah's movements down to the exact minute, noting when she woke up, when she ate meals, what packages were delivered, and who visited her property. The police also found similar detailed logs tracking the previous young woman who had lived in Sarah's house 2 years prior. The officers arrested Arthur on charges of felony stalking, criminal mischief, and attempted trespassing. A judge issued a strict emergency protection order prohibiting him from coming anywhere near Sarah or returning to his home without a police escort. The next week, Sarah had a professional security company install heavy window films, motion-activated floodlights, and a reinforced privacy fence along the property line. Arthur's family eventually stepped in and put his house up for sale to cover his legal expenses. Though the threat was gone, Sarah never looked at her quiet suburban street the same way again, realizing how easily a dangerous obsession can hide behind a friendly, welcoming smile. Story 4. The Landlord's Key. 26-year-old Rachel Green had just moved into a quiet, fourth-floor apartment in a renovated historic building in downtown Baltimore, Maryland. The property was managed by a small local real estate office, and the building relied on a combination of digital key cards for the main lobby and traditional heavy brass keys for the individual apartment doors. Rachel was relieved to finally find an affordable place close to her workplace, and the move-in process went smoothly. During her first week in the building, however, Rachel started noticing small, subtle details that seemed slightly out of place whenever she returned home from her job at a local hospital. On Tuesday evening, she walked into her kitchen and noticed that her coffee mug, which she distinctly remembered leaving on the counter next to the sink, was sitting on top of the dining table. On Thursday, she came home to find that her bathroom hand towel was damp and hanging from a different rack. At first, Rachel dismissed these occurrences, assuming she was simply tired from her long shifts and misremembering where she had placed her belongings while unpacking. By the second week, the discrepancies became impossible to ignore. One afternoon, Rachel returned home early from a canceled doctor's appointment. As she put her key into the deadbolt of her front door, she heard a soft, distinct click from inside her apartment, followed by the sound of quick, rushed footsteps across her hardwood floor. She unlocked the door and pushed it open, her heart beating fast. The apartment was empty. However, the sliding door to her small back fire escape balcony was unlatched and standing open by a few inches, letting in the cool city air. Rachel immediately called the building's leasing office to report the incident. The property manager, an aloof man named Richard who worked out of the ground floor management room, listened to her explanation with a skeptical expression. He insisted that no maintenance requests had been submitted for her unit and assured her that only 2 people held master keys to her apartment, himself and the chief maintenance supervisor. Richard suggested that perhaps she had left the fire escape door unlatched herself, politely dismissing her concerns. Unsatisfied with his response, Rachel decided to take matters into her own hands. Before leaving for work the following morning, she placed a thin, invisible piece of clear tape across the seam of her front door frame near the bottom, just above the floorboard. If anyone turned the handle and opened the door while she was gone, the tape would tear cleanly in half. She also activated a motion detection security app on her tablet computer, positioning the device discreetly on her bookshelf where its lens had a clear view of the front entryway and the main living room. That evening, Rachel arrived home at 6 o'clock. She knelt down in the dimly lit hallway outside her apartment to inspect the door frame. The piece of tape was torn completely in half. Rachel unlocked the door, stepped inside, and grabbed her tablet from the bookshelf to review the recorded clips. Her hands trembled as she unlocked the screen and opened the app's internal log. The app showed a 30-second video recorded at 2:15 that afternoon. In the video, the front door unlocked smoothly from the outside using a standard brass key. A man stepped into her apartment, wearing a dark blue maintenance uniform and holding a small notepad. He did not look around for items to steal. Instead, he walked directly into her bedroom, picked up a bottle of perfume from her dresser, smelled it, and placed it back down before sitting on the edge of her unmade bed for several minutes. Rachel recognized the man instantly. It was not Richard, nor was it the chief maintenance supervisor. It was the building's night shift custodian, a man named Marcus who was only supposed to clean the public hallways and lobby after hours. As she watched the clip, Rachel realized with a chill that Marcus had somehow obtained an unauthorized duplicate of her apartment key. And according to the app's activity log, he had been entering her home almost every single afternoon while she was at work. Rachel backed out of her apartment, holding her tablet tightly, and walked directly down the stairs to the ground floor management office. She demanded to speak with Richard immediately. When the property manager tried to offer another polite excuse, Rachel placed the tablet on his desk and played the video recording showing Marcus inside her bedroom. Richard's face drained of color as he watched the footage. He immediately called the chief maintenance supervisor into the office and demanded an explanation. When the supervisor checked the master key lockbox in the back room, they discovered that an unrecorded duplicate key for Rachel's unit was missing from the emergency hook. Marcus had secretly made a copy during the brief transition period before Rachel officially moved in. While Richard was on the phone calling the police, the front lobby doors opened, and Marcus walked into the building to start his evening shift. Seeing Rachel, Richard, and the maintenance supervisor standing together near the open office door with the tablet in hand, Marcus froze. He instantly realized what was happening. Without saying a word, he turned around and ran back out the glass lobby doors, sprinting down the street toward the city subway station. The local police arrived a few minutes later, took Rachel's video footage as evidence, and filed a report for felony burglary and stalking. Officers launched a search of the immediate area and arrested Marcus 2 hours later at his apartment across town. When detectives searched Marcus's home, they found a ring of unauthorized duplicate keys corresponding to 4 other units in the building, along with personal items he had quietly taken from various tenants over the previous several months. He had been using his access as a custodian to copy keys from the office lockbox, entering apartments during the day when he knew the residents were at work. The building's management company terminated Marcus immediately and hired an independent locksmith to replace the locks on every single apartment in the building with high security, electronic smart cylinders that logged every key entry in real time. They also installed continuous security cameras inside the maintenance hallways and key storage rooms to ensure master keys could never be accessed without authorization again. Rachel filed a formal complaint with the housing board, demanding to break her lease without penalty. Given the severity of the security breach and the official police report, the management company agreed to refund her security deposit and moving expenses in full. Within 2 weeks, Rachel moved into a small, well-guarded condo building with 24-hour front desk security and personal deadbolts she installed herself. She kept the tablet video saved on her phone as a permanent reminder never to ignore her instincts. The experience proved that even behind locked doors, true safety depends entirely on who holds the key. Story 5. Looking for someone else. 30-year-old Mark Higgins had recently purchased a modest ranch-style house in a quiet neighborhood in suburban St. Louis, Missouri. The home had sat vacant on the market for nearly 8 months after the previous tenant, a man named Trevor, was evicted following a messy, sudden departure. Mark got the property at a great price, and after spending a week painting the interior and cleaning out the remaining clutter, he officially moved his belongings inside. During his first weekend in the house, the strange visits began. On Saturday evening around 8 o'clock, while Mark was in the kitchen assembling a bookcase, someone knocked heavily on the front door. Mark opened it to find 2 muscular men in dark jackets standing on the porch. The men didn't introduce themselves. Instead, the taller man looked past Mark into the hallway and bluntly asked if Trevor was home. Mark politely explained that Trevor no longer lived there, adding that he had purchased the house a month ago and had no idea where the previous tenant had gone. The two men exchanged a cold look, looked Mark up and down, and left without saying another word, disappearing into a dark pickup truck parked down the street. At first, Mark brushed off the incident as an annoying consequence of moving into a house previously occupied by an unreliable tenant. But over the next several days, the pattern repeated itself. On Tuesday night, Mark found a handwritten note jammed into his mailbox. It was unaddressed, written in jagged capital letters, and contained a simple, threatening message. "Stop ignoring the calls, Trevor. Pay what you owe or we come inside." Mark realized the situation was far more dangerous than simple wrong number visits. Whoever was looking for Trevor clearly believed the former tenant was still hiding out in the house, pretending to be someone else to avoid his debts. Mark attempted to contact his real estate agent to get any forwarding information or background on Trevor, but the agent confirmed that Trevor had cut all ties, abandoned his lease, and left no forwarding address with the bank or the city. The situation came to a breaking point on Thursday night. At 11:30, while Mark was upstairs reading in bed, a loud, heavy thud rattled the front of the house. It was followed immediately by the sound of shattering glass in the lower living room. Someone had just thrown a heavy concrete paver through his front window. Mark leaped out of bed as the alarm system began to blare, its piercing siren filling the dark house. He ran to the top of the stairs and looked down into the dark living room, where cold night air was rushing through the shattered front window. Through the broken glass, he saw the silhouette of a man reaching his arm through the frame, trying to reach down and turn the interior door handle from the inside. Mark shouted at the man, declaring that he had already called 911 and that the police were on their way. The figure stopped, his hand resting on the lock. He shined a bright tactical flashlight directly up the stairs into Mark's face, blinding him for a moment. In a low, aggressive voice, the man told Mark to stop playing games and demanded to know where Trevor was hiding the money he had stolen from their business. Mark shielded his eyes and repeated as clearly as he could that he had bought the house from a bank foreclosure, that he was a completely different person, and that Trevor had been gone for nearly a year. The man stepped back onto the porch, keeping the flashlight beam locked on Mark. He said that Trevor had used this exact house address to run a fraudulent shipping operation, and that until the missing funds were recovered, anyone living under this roof was considered part of the problem. Before the man could kick the front door open, the faint wail of distant police sirens echoed through the suburban neighborhood. Realizing his time was up, the man pointed a finger at Mark through the broken window, warning him that they would be watching the house, before turning and sprinting down the driveway toward a dark sedan idling with its lights off at the corner of the street. The car sped away into the night just as two police cruisers pulled onto the block. Officers cleared the house, secured the perimeter, and took a full report of the incident. Mark provided the handwritten note from his mailbox, along with a description of the two men who had visited earlier that week. Detectives cross-referenced the address and confirmed that Trevor had an outstanding federal warrant for grand larceny and wire fraud, having used multiple fake identities and physical locations across the state to evade collection agencies and former business partners. Over the next 48 hours, the police department set up extra patrols around Mark's neighborhood, and local detectives eventually tracked down two of Trevor's former associates at a motel near the highway, arresting them for felony burglary, stalking, and destruction of property. Mark spent the following week repairing the broken window, installing a high-grade security system with reinforced glass break sensors, and placing visible warning signs around the perimeter of his property. He also worked with his attorney to register a formal public record affidavit stating that Trevor had no connection to the home or its current owner. Moving into a new house is supposed to mark a clean slate, a chance to build a life in a space that feels completely your own. But as Mark learned the hard way, You never truly know what secrets or dangerous debts are left lingering behind the walls before you turn the key for the very first time. Thank you for listening to tonight's stories on Dreadful Visions. If these situations chilled you or made you double-check your own front door locks tonight, please leave a like on the video and subscribe to the channel. We upload brand new, realistic long-form horror videos every other day, so make sure to hit that notification bell so you never miss a new release. Tell us in the comments which of tonight's stories unsettled you the most. Until next time, stay safe, stay aware, and remember, the scariest monsters are the ones walking right outside your window.